Episode 2 Europe. Arriving back in Scotland is always strange. It is where my family live and where I grew up, but I have become a product of all the countries I've lived in, not of only one. More on detachment from cultural stereotypes in a future episode. At this time, I felt I was in need of some space and time to think, so I packed my bags ready to set out on a ride. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I had often dreamed of touring the European continent on a motorcycle. I'd picked up this Suzuki GSXF 750 a couple years before. During my annual return trips to Scotland, I kept myself entertained by doing some work to get it into a reliable condition. I had rebuilt, replaced, upgraded or serviced the carburetor, fork, clutch plates, chains, sprockets, steerer bearings, fluids, caliper seals, pads, valve clearances, balanced the carbs to give me more confidence going long distance. This model didn't come with a pannier rack, so I got creative the year before. I cut up another rack designed for a Kawasaki and modified it to fit. My good friend Andy Armour, a custom bicycle builder in Edinburgh, helped me weld something up. Sandblasted it, painted it black. It looked like it was meant to be on this machine. I said goodbye to my parents and took off. I figured, I know some people. I'll message them en route and see if they're free to have a beer. First stop was less than an hour away, just to get on the road and figure out if I had everything with me. I visited another brother, who I've known for the last 25 years. A few brews and a good feed, a night's sleep, and south I rolled. Second stop was with another old friend, in Sheffield, the Steel City, situated at the foot of the Pennines. Sheffield was hugely significant in the British Industrial Revolution, especially famed for cutlery manufacture, but now offices account for more employment than manufacturing. From here it was straight down from the centre of England to the south coast on the next section. I managed to hit some traffic and it got pretty hot.
Well, this sucks.
But I eventually arrived in Folkestone on the south coast of England, not far from the Channel Tunnel. The hotel was a proverbial shithole, but the view was pleasant. On trips like this are some bucket list type achievements. Things like riding a motorcycle onto a train and going under the sea I think counts for me. It turned out there were a bunch of southerners just cruising out from their home to go to the beach in France for the day. How cool to be able to do that as a day trip. I had bigger plans already, being over 500 miles from my starting place. Today was my first big day. It turned out that my friends in Belgium and the Netherlands weren't home, but I had visited both countries before, so I blasted straight through to Germany, only stopping at gas stations. The weather was good. My bike was riding well. So I selected Hamburg as the evening destination. The Autobahn was a blast. It's so practical that it cannot be understated. Japan has high-speed rail, which is technologically marvellous, but trust the Germans to solve an engineering problem, effectively and efficiently. Everyone has a capable vehicle, so why not just make the roads wide enough, straight enough and smooth enough to unleash and rip your way to your destination by car or bike? My main concern was looking after my old bike though. I'm carrying luggage, so I kept to a sensible pace. I managed to roll into Hamburg just as the sun was setting, seeing some of the shipping industry in the twilight. Seeing as the road was the destination on this trip, I stayed in a hostel to recharge my electronics, take a shower and have a sleep, followed by an archetypal continental breakfast. Again I hit the road. Hamburg was a handsome city. Aiming slightly northward, the next stop would lead me to Copenhagen to see a good buddy, Thorbjorn, who I had just met a year prior in Japan. It was actually my intention to ride all the way north into Denmark and cross the bridges, but I took a wrong turn and ended up so close to the ferry that I let fate play its part.
€59. 59.
Lane number 1.
There's no use trying to fight everything, right? Today was the first ferry of the trip, and I was pleased to discover that motorcycles have priority when it comes to loading and unloading.
Please help yourself.
It's almost like flying first class, except you have to tie down your own bike to stop it falling over on the rolling seas. It was windy as hell. Upstairs a classic lunch, and back out onto the flat, windy land of Denmark. This section was pretty smooth and more like home, country roads surrounded by farms and trees, but the architecture started to become distinct. I'd visited Denmark once before, but not Copenhagen, and immediately there was delight in my eyes and in my heart. It is an absolutely beautiful city. I stayed a couple of nights here as Thorbjorn offered to be my tour guide. I borrowed a bicycle from one of his friends and we cycled around the city drinking beers for the day.
Here I am riding through Copenhagen City. Top of the northern leg. This whole place is fantastic. It really is.
Giant, beautiful sunny day. 12 degrees.
A nice warm 12 degrees.
Not bad, not
A
bad.
few beers in the park. Christiana.
Perfect. What a day, huh?
What a day.
Checking out the community free town Christiania, the Parliament building, and Nijhaven, to name a few. Some great meals, plenty of Tuborgs, and some great rest.
Awesome time in Denmark, Thor. Really appreciate it, buddy.
He saw me on my way south again and back towards Germany. This time the weather wasn't as good to start off, but the roads were great. Back on the ferry,
Thank you, buddy.
slicing through East Germany towards Berlin.
Refill the Scott Oiler. Lube it up. Back on the road to Berlin. Woo!
Another city I hadn't visited.
Well, this is Berlin. Looks pretty nice. Got some trees in here.
Unfortunately, my friends from there also weren't available, so I looked up the top things to see on Google and did a rapid loop to scope them out from the comfort of my saddle.
We're rolling. Cool looking big planes around there. This is quite nice. Well, regal looking day. Alright, last minute decision. Not staying in Berlin. Massive queue for those kebabs. Beautiful building.
And I kept rolling. I managed to reach Dresden in darkness that night. The following morning I relaxed and checked out some of the buildings in the city. Impressive Baroque and Rococo architecture were distinct thus far on the trip and really contrasted with the elegant simplicity of Denmark.
Tell you one thing though, it is hot again. It's going to rain later, I think. So, we'll see you on the highway.
I hadn't changed the bike's oil before I left Scotland, so I decided Prague seemed like a reasonable target. Being on a bike sure has its advantages. Sitting in traffic is one of the worst things I can imagine, but cutting through it makes me smile every time.
In Prague, I changed my oil in about an hour. Bonus.
Another distinctly beautiful place, with its mixture of historical and modern buildings and bridges. I was real lucky to get into a hotel before the most torrential rainfall arrived. Watching from the hotel room while hearing the sounds from the room next door,
I started
the Czechs
feeling
make
like I was
while
doing
loving each other.
reconnaissance of places I'd like
Fortunately,
to
the
visit
rain
again one
passed
day.
and allowed me to wander the streets by
Infrastructure in
night,
Germany is
finding a
superb.
place to drink good Czech beer and eat goulash. The next morning, Susie wasn't too happy.
Well, good morning.
Bike wouldn't start.
Just probably in the breakfast.
The rear lights not working.
I don't know if she was just cold, but the battery died when I was trying to turn her over. I made another stop at a motorcycle shop.
Okay, we still didn't escape Prague. Went shopping, got some new pants, replaced the broken ball, so we're making some progress.
Firstly, today I wove my way over the rolling Czech countryside, punctuated only by small villages. I felt far away from home, partly I suppose due to the Czech language on the road signs. It is a language of Slavic origin, of which I have no experience. It would be great to explore more of Eastern Europe with a grip. I was passed by a Polish crew riding choppers, and for a little while I regretted my solo venture. I had been riding south ever since Copenhagen, and now it was time to swing around westward. The weather became fine for a time, and the Alps started to rise in the distance. I would cross into Austria briefly, then back into Germany, and once again into Austria, watching the mountains grow before me. I recall a similar feeling twice before when I saw the Rockies. The anticipation is marvelous as the distant wrinkles on the horizon begin to loom above. Even when carrying a good pace, their growth is gradual, and this gives distance more perspective, something sorely lacking when crossing the highways on the open plains. I made a stop in Salzburg when considering where to stay the night. I discovered that a good friend, Flam, was not too far away in Meyerhofen. He had just succeeded in passing his BASI level 4 that very day. I could hardly deny celebrating with him, so I made haste and blasted over. Through rain, the mountains were on all sides. The sun hadn't dropped yet, and riding westward I imagined chasing it to extend the daylight hours. found the southward tunnel entry to the Zillertal Valley. It was dusky and the roads weren't quiet, but it was great riding. Long corners with good visibility, snow-capped peaks in the distance. I was having the time of my life. Again, as was becoming a habit, I arrived in darkness.
What happening?
Yo, whereabouts are you?
I don't know.
When I eventually found the address, we started with some casual beers before meeting a guy who insisted he was a Viking. Then we frequented a mainly deserted club to have a party, all night.
We built this city on rock and roll.
We staggered home as the light was rising in the sky and slept all the next day. Awaking with a mother hangover, I saw Meyerhofen in the light for the first time from the window. Flam had to give some people a ride up to the Hintertux Glacier. Incidentally, a few of my colleagues from New Zealand were to be examining that week, so we caught up briefly, which was cool. A very nice surprise to see them. For a second day, Susie wasn't happy.
Here we go! Stop over in Austria, it was pretty rad! Over the Alps! After a stop in Innsbruck to try and find a new rear tire, because this thing is all! Whoop!
It had been sleeting all the way to the base of the valley.
So, we've got new tires on. Continental Road Attack 3. Looks like there's going to be snow. About a 4.5 hour ride to Milan. It might take a bit longer. Apparently these tires don't need scrubbed in, so you're going to have to be pretty bloody careful. We'll see what happens. Alright, that's the other road.
The snow and ice would become a standout contrast of my entire journey. I had to start off wearing all the clothes that I brought with me. Passing into northern Italy, I wound down from the highs of the Alps and watched the mountains melt away just as the snow did. It was a relaxing ride, for me and the bike. Long sweeping corners, ever downward as the oxygen thickened and the temperature rose. As I continued down, I was feeling excited to reach the Mediterranean. I love the mountains, but holidays for me mean going to the coast. Down, down, down went the road, and up, up went the temperature. I traversed onward and westward towards France. Without a schedule or plan, I looked at the map and decided Monaco was exotic in my imagination and within reach. The skies became clearer and more favourable, and my lord was it pleasing. When the coast finally came into sight, I felt excitement and relief.
We're going to Monaco! Woohoo!
My first memory of Monaco was of watching Formula 1 with my father before I started school. Fittingly, the city was in preparation for the 2019 race.
Looks like we've seen Italy, and we're now in France.
I was in awe of the fact that I had crossed the Alps from Austria today, passed Italy and arrived in the French Riviera by nightfall. We don't have that privilege in Scotland where I come from, which now in my mind amounts to a remote peninsula of wild Western Europe. The most epic timing saw me ride in as the sun was dropping, a pink and blue sky over a jeweled city. I rode all the way down to the harbour, finding the streets were closed in preparation for the Grand Prix.
Why would you be taking a van down here, man? Awesome. I don't know what I expected, but this is lovely. Wow, look at that.
I managed to park on a corner of the circuit beside the harbour and take some photos when I looked for somewhere to stay. It became apparent that Monaco was super expensive.
That's pretty cool.
So I continued further to the neighbouring city of Nice. Another lucky turn of fate, because the coast road between Monaco and Nice is so pleasantly winding that it would be worth riding on any day, let alone as the sun is setting.
Fonse. Nice, beautiful little town here. Traffic is pretty French. Sucks. You can see things getting a little hot. I'm gonna stop at a boulangerie. I'm gonna go to some little towns on the French Riviera before heading towards España. Some French traffic bullshit. Look, we might have to give way here or something. Does everyone give way? Does no one give way? Who's got right away? Whoever's got the biggest dick, I guess. Come on, let's get to the beach. Let's go to the beach. Come on now, traffic lights, that ain't cool. Ba-na-na-na-na-na. Oh, this is exciting. To reach the Mediterranean feels like kind of a big deal. Northern Europe, somewhat familiar, but there's palm trees, and then there's a beach down here, and there's a weird French dude with a hat. This shit bananas. String onions.
This morning I decided to have some easy recreation.
But have a look to the left here and check out the fact that there's actually snow still visible on those mountains. Spectacular combination. When we pull up on one of the biggest marinas, there's some big boats in there.
I made a point of staying as close to the sea as possible. This area was holiday incarnate.
Really quite cool.
Slowly meandering my way down the coast, so far away from the autobahn in the north. Basking in sunshine, but it is slow movement. So after a few hours of admiring yachts, villas and palm trees by the beach, I jumped back on the highway, eating more miles.
Okay, we're going so slow. We're hitting the highway.
It had become an endurance feat, trying to cover more and more land like a goose migrating. I was loving the sun and heat.
Bastards!
After yesterday's long journey, the intrigue of reaching a new city had become more rewarding than the tourism of being there. So without regret, I rode onwards, anticipating Spain with eager eyes.
Zamora! Oh!
I had visited Barcelona before, but riding into it on my bike was an exotic idea,
Barcelona smells kind of funny.
further defining my distance from home. But I was at one with the long days at this stage, so I powered onwards and again arrived after nightfall.
Alright, let's see what this looks like. Hola amigos from Barcelona, España. Pretty nice little place actually. In the middle of some real nice park. A couple of funny old Irish guys from Northern Ireland. And it's a 12-hour drive. Like that's non-stop driving. I'm rocking the sleeveless t-shirts. It just helps with a little bit of air circulation. And so it begins. Na 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 na.
The one place I knew I wanted to reach on this trip was to meet my very dear brother Stasiek in Portugal. We had talked in the preceding days about my arrival, and I felt I was capable of this final stretch in a single bound. I had considered riding the south coast of Spain, but my realization that the finest moments of this trip had been with friends along the way, I decided that was for another day. So I set the sat-nav for the swiftest route across Spain and ploughed onwards through the dry land. Over 13 hours of riding and 1,200 kilometers. The previous evening, I had met an old man from Ireland. He had obviously been a wild young man in his day.
Just had a spot of lunch.
His first words were, "That's a fair snorter you got there," referring to my bike. I was regaled with his tales of misdemeanors riding motorcycles too fast past police cars in days gone by, and the death of many friends through pursuit of adrenaline and speed. With that, he gave me a piece of advice, which was more effective than any piece of advice given by any other. He didn't tell me, don't go too fast. He told me, stay sharp, and with that a serious look in his eye. And it echoed in my mind for hours and weeks and months and years since. It's not the speed which is fatal, it's the lack of awareness. That doesn't only mean keep your eyes wide and attention on the road, it also encompasses all the preparation for survival. Use safety equipment, prepare your bike, consider the conditions in every blind corner, to refuse assumption and to be hyper aware of risk. Only now can you begin to consider that you have a plan. The setting sun was never a disappointment, even that I should continue to ride in darkness, still being away from my destination. I am in repeated deference for these short periods of sunrise and sunset, so I did not hurry at all at that point. I only took pleasure in its majesty. Then again came the meditation, focused on the road in my headlight.
Final checkpoint, hopefully. 21 kilometers to go! We hit the 4,000 mile mark!
It felt like coming home when I found the address. I was exhausted and had no desire to do this trip again. So after we ate a fine meal and drank some beer, a short holiday began. The previous day was extreme. Finally arriving here in Portugal was such a relief. Time to take a breath and enjoy the tranquility. I couldn't feel any more at home despite being so far away. Watching the sun disappear over the Atlantic and laughing and drinking beer with Stan and Wendy was wonderful. I could completely understand their choice to move here. The next day we took a car trip to Coimbra, the medieval capital of Portugal. Once again I was enamored with the buildings typical of the region. Coming back to the coast in time to witness the soothing sunset over the water, before a few beers in an awesome bar built in an old fort. Breakfast.
Okay, should be recording now.
Then Stan and I went for a ride.
We're going down to Nazaré. Go for it.
11 years before this, we had been at university together, living in Edinburgh and riding bicycles without motors. We rode everywhere, so in this way it was a return to old times. Two boys and their bikes.
Cash. 4.
It was the first time we had both had motorcycles in the same place. Going out to ride with your mate is great fun. Whether on bikes, motorcycles, skateboards or snowboards, chasing each other around and carving up the asphalt is just too much fun. The destination of Nazaré is directly southwards on the coast of Portugal, but to get there we would have to cut inland a bit at times, passing through loose forests and small towns. This was my dream of how it should be to tour these lands. We found time to stop for a cool drink before continuing to our destination. Riding without panniers for the first time in 2 weeks, my bike felt light and agile, but not quite as light as my buddy on his ZZR 600. Our riding was conservative compared to many of the people we met on the road. We need not make haste, only enjoy the journey. When we did arrive at Nazaré, the famed big wave spot, we found the flattest seas that you can imagine. While it would be great to see those monster waves, the weather was perfect for riding on bikes with the lack of a strong onshore wind. We relaxed a while and checked out the surf museum before going for some food and hitting the road north again. Neither one of us was to blame, but somehow we got sidetracked riding around and decided to jump onto a toll road to make up some time. It couldn't have been more bromantic, burning dinosaurs as we flew. Since we were passing, we stopped by for a refreshment at the fort before heading home.
Yeah, battery's dead. Start of the journey north, my buddy Stashik. He's riding out with me from Big Reda. We're gonna go north, have breakfast somewhere near Porto. Alright, see you on the road.
It was good to have my buddy on the first section that day. We sat down and drank coffee, had some breakfast, and I struck north on my own. Today my goal was to ride the west coast of Portugal up into Spain and towards the most westerly point of Europe. It had been a suggestion of my buddy Tor back when I was in Denmark. Whereas he had walked there on the Camino Finisterre, I was on another journey.
No one likes paying tolls, and there's been a lot of them on this trip.
The riding was good through the warm weather, and as I neared Fisterra, the roads narrowed and were great fun.
Here we are in Fisterra.
It was truly peaceful, sitting there looking out to sea. Knowing that my journey would take me in the opposite direction, due east, before aiming north for the final stage, I took time to relax and realised this really was my last stop before going backwards towards my starting place.
That was beautiful. Now we've got a long way to go east and a long way to go north.
While stopping for fuel, I had a chance encounter with a guy who had the 600cc version of my bike, but modified to look more sports than it really is.
Just met my brother.
I did ride east well into the evening, and the temperature fell. Breakfast.
Oh, Oviedo, but I'm pretty sure that's not how you say it, Spain. Stopped here for the night. Now my sat nav doesn't work and I don't know how to get the hell out of here. But I'm guessing it's over that way.
Today I had big expectations. Having hoped to reach San Sebastian the day before, I was behind schedule and facing pure mileage across northern Spain, and then up France, before riding the height of England.
Oh, you're gonna work now, are you?
And beyond the wall into Scotland. So I tucked my head down, my elbows in, and carried on, mile by mile. The north of Spain was a surprise. Its green and mountainous coastline unlike anywhere else I have been.
Let's be honest, I've been quite slack in not trying out some of these other camera angles this entire trip. Bastards. Another €12.
The road wound in and out of the hills and down to the water many times before it passed through the even more incredible Basque country. A suspended ribbon of highway above towns and below buildings set even higher on the mountainsides. In the last part of my trip, it secured a place on the list of my places to return one day.
Sumimasen! I cannot help it. It's the way of the road, bubs. It's the way of the road.
Into France I rode the motorways north, past trucks and cars alike until the night came, and I didn't stop. I was ready to end my journey. My body had begun to ache from the long days, and I no longer anticipated the magic of new places. It was time. Darkness, cold, and rain. Through the night I rode. I arrived at the northern port of Cherbourg a little while before the sun came up.
Bonjour! Totally destroyed, so tired. Arrived here before sun came up. Been waiting here for 2 hours. Bike's struggling, she's breathing heavy, but we'll see if we can make it. There you go, Jim. There's your mate.
Feeling exhausted, I would board the first ferry of the day to Poole, England, and sleep for the entirety of the time at sea.
And with that, we are back on British soil. We're gonna go past Stonehenge, and then we're gonna start rolling north. Weather looks not too bad right now, but it's forecast to be cold as all buggery. Some of the coldest riding that we've done on the trip. Welcome to Poole. It's a beautiful place. I'm sure I know a few people that's gonna disagree with that. Tell me it's a total...
When I awoke, it was still the morning, and the bright light and brief rest had made me feel so much better than the end of the night before. I was ready to embark on a final push. I had never visited this part of England before, and knowing that Stonehenge was nearby, I decided it was worth trying to see it. Unfortunately, you had to find tickets, and there were dozens of tour buses and tourists there before I arrived. So after some cursing, I decided to accept my loss, only to inadvertently take the road right past the monolith. So I did get to see it, appropriately for this trip, from the comfort of my saddle.
Fuel stop, this time in Birmingham, rush hour, still 6 hours to go. Go to the north!
The roads in the UK were possibly the worst of the whole tour.
First time on the whole of the European tour! Average speed camera, only in the UK!
Plagued with roadworks and speed restrictions and heavy traffic. But I grit my teeth and pushed onward, every mile bringing me towards the place most familiar. Never had I felt so at home crossing the European continent as I had on this journey, meeting friends in so many countries, despite narrowly missing out on so many other attempted liaisons. The geography and the architecture were highlights of this journey for me, alongside the meeting of friends. That is to say nothing of the time spent with my trusty steed. The bond between man and machine had been strengthened. She's not the newest or the fastest bike in the world, but she has been reliable and trustworthy. Working on and caring for an old bike is part of the joy of motorcycling. Also, always being aware that a problem could arise at any time makes the relationship a real one. I care for you and you care for me type of arrangement. I put a good number of miles under my belt on this journey, and ultimately that was another goal. Before I move up to a bigger and more powerful machine, I committed to ride at least 25,000 miles on this 750. And a long trip around Europe is a good way to tally a few more. Finally, I had also achieved a lifelong dream, to take a motorcycle tour to Europe. This video story, documentary, whatever you want to call it, is a diary for myself to look back on, to remind me in 40 minutes of the trip of a lifetime.
So we're getting through the day. Just stopped at this delicious Burger King for a little sandwich and coffee and a Red Bull. Because when you're rocking like this, coffee or one Red Bull is not enough. So you gotta have one each. Keep yourself sharp. Time to rock and roll. Last 200 miles. Alas, here we are on the road again.
Would I do it again? Not like this. I'd planned to spend more time in my favorite cities, take the chance to explore more winding side roads, go with friends, ride a faster bike. But that trip wouldn't be this one. That would be another story. This one was perfect with all the miscalculations and errors of judgment. I wouldn't change it. I learned a lot and found the time to eat wind and consider life. I want to smell you. I want to taste you. I want to feel you.
driving past